Hi, my name is Frank Firestein, and I am the Art in Bloom Artist of the Month here in December and into January of 2021. I want to thank them for giving me this opportunity to showcase my work. When I moved here several years ago down in North Carolina, I went to many galleries in the area and decided that this was really the best and nicest gallery that I could find. It's a real privilege to have them take me on and showcase my work like they're doing. I am a traditional photographer in the sense that I do my own film and I do my own darkroom work. I refer to myself more as an artist, much like a painter does work with paint, brushes, and canvas, and a sculptor does work with chisels and hammer. I just use my camera as my artistic way of getting into doing what is important to me, an emotional side of the work. So that's what my goal is. Film is beautiful to work with, and even though I've seen many digital black and white images, I still find that there is something special about working with the silver gelatin prints that I do. They're made one by one in my darkroom by me, and they are processed in a way that makes them last for over 100 years. So I'm very proud of the quality of my work that I produce. I'm going to show you some of the cameras that I use. Because I have different ones for different purposes. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with 35mm cameras, and certainly these are great cameras if you want to work quickly. I tend to use my 35 in the streets and in different cities because I can work very fast. It's also got a fairly large amount of images on it, 36 exposures, so I don't have to reload my film very often. But the main thing is that I can palm this and hold this in my hand, and I'm very quick to bring it up, take the picture, and put it down. Okay. This produces a negative that's nice. Here's a series of negatives that are produced from 35mm. This is called a contact sheet. Basically, what I do in the darkroom is I take the negatives, I put it on top of the contact, and I expose light through it, and then I get these little pictures, much like you would see in Lightroom if you're familiar with Lightroom. Okay, and that allows me to take a look and see, what they look like and examine them and decide which ones I'd like to actually enlarge or make bigger. Okay, my go-to camera is this one here. This is called a medium format camera, and basically what that means is that the film size is much larger than the 35. And the reason why I like this camera so much is that it really fits in my hand very well, and I can move around with it very easily. And the quality of the negative that I get from that is superior to the 35. So that really gives me a lot more, a better quality to work with. If I compared this camera and the film with today's digital world, this is equivalent to about 150 megapixel camera, which is very, very high for resolution. Okay, so just a great camera to work with. The negative that it makes looks more like this, much larger. Okay, and then associated contact print with that as well, so that I can see what I'm doing. Obviously, these are much easier to see than the 35s. Okay, so really, like I said, my go-to camera, the one that I love the most. Final camera is this, and I'll hold this up right here. Okay, this is my view camera, and a lot of times when people see me, they say, "Wow, you use that old camera." Well, no, this is an old style camera. And yes, it is the kind of camera that people, during the 19th and 20th century used a lot, but this is actually a very new, modern version of those old cameras. This camera, it's called a view camera. It has many, many advantages over other cameras, but it's very slow, very methodical. I photograph one at a time. In fact, this is a film holder, and it only holds 2 pictures. I put it in, I take a picture, I take it out, I flip it around, take a second picture. So it works very slow, but it makes me think and contemplate what I'm doing, and it's a very beautiful camera to work with. I wear a cloth over my head, which I won't take out, and that allows me to actually see what I'm looking at. And the nice thing about the cloth is that when I throw it over my head and I have my camera, it's like my own little world in there, and I can really focus on what I'm looking at. Beautiful camera to work with, slow, quality that is unmistakably superior. It's just amazing, the quality. And this is a small one, The other cameras that are like this is 4x5, are 8x10, 11x14, and bigger. Show you the negative. Here's the negative that I get from that particular camera, and the associated contact print that I get from it as well. So these are the cameras that I use depending on what I want to do. If I'm in the street, I'm using my 35. If I'm out doing most general photography, I'm using my medium format. And if I really want to be contemplative and spend quiet moments and time photographing, the View camera becomes really the go-to camera. Most of my work is edgy, and the reason for that is because I spent most of my time growing up in the ghettos of Baltimore City. My parents had a store down there, and from the age of 5 on, for about 15 years, that's where I spent most of my time. So in an environment like that, and we were near the projects, there's an edginess to what I do. And the reason why I photograph very edgy is because I wanted to be able to understand the aspect of myself. So by photographing things like that and making them into prints, I can better relate to my feelings of that time and all that I went through. There's the other side of the coin too as well, and that is that when things really get too tough or too stressed out, I go to the woods, and we'll talk about that a little later on. This was the first print of a series. I called it Dark Matters, and the reason why it's called Dark Matters is because it's the first time that I began to realize that what I was trying to do was to emphasize the dark, or that darker side. In my family, we talked about Jungian psychology, and there is a term in Jungian psychology called the shadow figure. And what that represents is that your alter ego side, that dark side of you. So what I ended up doing was looking at that and going after the images. This one was the first one that represented that darkness. I try to create a balance. So I understand that in darkness there is light, in good there is bad. Both of those sides are really important. One doesn't exist without the other one. So in this case, the dark really came through. This particular image is called Burst, and it has an interesting story about it. This is the Baltimore Basilica. It's a beautiful church in the center of Baltimore City. And I was called by a group of photographers saying would I like to join them for a 2-hour photo shoot inside the church. So when I arrived there at the church, the leader of the group said to me how many pictures I had taken at that point, and I said none, and he said you better get to work, we only have 2 hours. And I said great. And as I walked around and looked at all the other photographers and what they were doing, I discovered that they were taking all of the typical pictures. They were taking the pews, they were taking the statues, they were taking the stained glass. And as I walked around, I kept thinking to myself, gee, everybody takes the same pictures, the same things over and over again. So as I walked around and I began to head to different parts of the church, when I went up the steps to go up to a mezzanine in the church, I noticed that the hallway, as I got to the bottom of the stairs, was just brilliant. I mean, what a beautiful light was coming up from the bottom to the second floor. So I sat there and I photographed this, and it was a very long exposure because it was so dark in the hallway. But when I go back and I think about this image, it's interesting to me that everybody else was taking all these typical pictures of the church, where I found what I called a real beautiful image in just the hallway. I mentioned earlier that there's 2 sides to my personality when I photograph, and there's that edgy side that usually dominates pretty much, but when that gets too much, I tend to go out and look for some peace and quiet and solitude. The trees offer that to me. I love photographing in the trees. This happened to be a morning where we got a 1/4 inch of ice, and it was all over the roads and the trees and everywhere. Where most people stay inside, I was out running around with the camera trying to capture some of the beauty. It was like a winter wonderland. All of these tree branches were covered with ice, and for me, what was so nice about this was that, and I called it frozen fingers, is that they were trying to touch each other. Even in all that coldness, it was just so beautiful to be out there all day long. A recent image by me at Lake Waccamaw called Quiet Solitude, and when I got to Lake Waccamaw and walked out and saw this, it was just wonderful. So I called it Quiet Solitude because that's what it kind of represents to me. It's so peaceful and quiet and a beautiful place to be. On the bottom here is an image from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And the Amish people are very interesting. There is a certain quality to the type of environment that they create. They do not like you photographing them. They feel that you would capture their spirit if you did take a picture of them. So I'm very respectful of them and try not to, but I still wanted something that represented the area. I call this Yoder's Field because it represented a field in which they worked. It was a beautiful, foggy kind of day, and just with a little bit of water in the bottom, and it really spoke to me about how the Amish till their fields and represent this kind of lifestyle that was just so beautiful. These two images are very representational of how I feel about when I work. This one goes back a ways. It's called Medusa, and I had taken a break from photography for a little while to kind of get my head straight and figure out where I was going in my life, and decided to go down into Washington, D.C. and lay on the ground and just photograph the trees from that prone position. I was laughing, I was rolling around in the grass, and as usual, when I act strange outside, the police are called. So the park police came by and they said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm fine, I'm just having a good time." And they said, "Great, that's really nice." But to me, I call this Medusa because of all those arms that Medusa had and all those curves and stuff. And it was more or less of an unleashing of so much inside of me that I just felt that it represented a great image to that. This is a new image, and I took it at Moores Creek Battlefield. When I go someplace, sometimes I can really connect with the feel of the place. And at Moores Creek Battlefield, there was just something about it. It's not that there was a lot there, but I could really sense the troops and the battles and all that was going on. When I looked into the water here, it was just so beautiful. There was just teeming with life, and the swirls and the light was perfect. And I ended up making this image that I call Pool of Dreams, because I think that it represents that whole time frame, dreams of winning the war, or thinking about what it would be like after the Civil War and all that was over with. Okay, so really a new image for me, a very quiet, wonderful, beautiful image for me that I enjoy a lot. So I'm going to wrap this up. I would like again to thank Art and Bloom Gallery for showcasing my work. It's a great opportunity. Great people to work with. Please come down here and buy some art because they need your support. Finally, I'd like to just thank my wonderful wife for her support. She has been outstanding in giving me the time to do what I need to do. Sam is a beautiful lady, and she photographs too, and it's wonderful to share with her photography. We go out together, we work in the darkroom together, but without her support, I'm not sure I would have been able to pull all this together. So I love you, Sam. Thank you.